record. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Happy Choice podcast. Today, I have my friend here, Valerie Barton, and Valerie is the executive director of the Youth Mental Health Project. Hey, Valerie.
Hey, how are you, Ashlee?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Your background is beautiful, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had help.
Beautiful. We connected, and I'm so grateful that we did. And I'm so proud of what you guys are doing. Can you explain to everyone what is the Youth Mental Health Project?
Yep. So we are a nonprofit. We're US based, and we are motivated by reducing the sort of stigma, the blame, shame, misunderstanding, and silence around mental health. And so our mission really is to educate, empower, and support families and communities so that they can better understand and recognize and care for the mental health of our youth. And we focus in that area because kids don't have the tools necessarily. So the people who need to help them with their mental health issues are the adults in their lives. And we say parents sort of as a shorthand for parents, grandparents, step-parents, foster parents, aunts, uncles, anyone who really cares about and cares for a child in their life. And we work with families and can support families with kids up to about age 24. And we go that high because that transition into adulthood can be very difficult, whether somebody's going to college or they're not. They really do have there's a lot of transition to that adulthood, and there's a real moment of vulnerability there for a lot of young people.
Wow. So powerful and very, 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 very inspiring. We don't speak about so much about mental health and what's going on. And so the fact that you guys not only help children, you help the parents who can help the children. It's mind-blowing, and I'm so grateful to be a part of everything that you guys do. Can you explain to everyone what are the struggles that we see in terms of youth mental health? The main struggles?
Yeah, so I think it's so there's sort of a continuum. I think there's the talking about it, and you can't address things that you're not talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been a blocker for a really long time. Now I feel like over the past, certainly since I was growing up, right, nobody really talked about this. It was shameful. And I think in certain situations, it's still shameful. So that's why we're sort of at this part of the continuum. And then if you get to, then we also see situations where parents will know something's going on. They don't know what it is, or their kid, or they sort of aren't picking up on the signs, and then their kid is suicidal and they have a crisis. And one of the problems is that we have not invested in mental health like we have needed to as a society. And this was a problem before the pandemic. So finding resources, and then even when you find resources and say, I want to get my kid into a therapist, my kid needs a psychiatrist, or, in significant cases where they need, a therapeutic school, a therapeutic boarding school, it is very, very hard to find availability. I mean, the waiting lists are tremendous, and there's a whole lot of reasons for that. I think that, this underinvestment means that, and the changes in insurance rules over the past 20 or 30 years regarding mental health have made it very difficult. So a lot of psychiatrists that do even see young patients, particularly pediatric ones, there's maybe, 50% don't take insurance, right?
Right.
And so there's a cost barrier to access, and public systems are very overwhelmed. So we are focused kind of on the early piece of this. I think one of the things that I have as a twinkle in my eye for us to do more of as the Youth Mental Health Project is joint advocacy efforts around funding. And some of that has changed. The CARES Act in the United States has changed that and increased funding, and that is starting to trickle down into the system, into public health agencies at the local level, and also into grants for organizations like ours, which I think helps. But I do think that under-resourcing for parents, and I think a lot is flowing directly to students, which absolutely it should. But what I've been hearing in the past couple of months since I've been with the organization is parents, even parents who are well-resourced, right? I mean, I had coffee with a friend who's a doctor last week. She's a physician, and she had a heck of a time. She was like, I'm calling everyone I know. I'm calling all the doctors I know, and I still can't get the resources for my kid. So that's something as a society we need to address for sure.
Wow. And Valerie, is it a lack of resources, or is it lack of people not knowing about the resource?
Both. I think in many cases, people don't know about the resources. They don't know how to navigate them. Parents will talk to other parents and learn word of mouth. Like in our case, our son had his diagnoses early. We recognized for him, it was a pretty significant case. We recognized and got diagnosis when he was 4, 5, 6 years old. But, friends of ours then kind of, when their kids started having problems, and we were very private about it up until I joined this organization. But if a friend was having trouble, we would kind of say, okay, here's what's going on with us. And here's our psychiatrist, here's a psychologist, here's how you navigate the school system for an IEP.
Wow.
Like here's, you know what I mean? But this word of mouth is part of why we have our parent support network, support groups, because it gives people in local communities the ability to have those conversations with more people and not spend a lot of time doing what we were doing. So there's definitely that, lack of awareness issue, and parents being able to recognize that their kids are having an issue, and some of these strange behaviors, like my kid is not getting out of bed and hasn't gotten out of bed or gone to school for a couple of weeks. What is going on? Right. And not having it if it's not in your own experience in particular, you can be like, I get out of bed, right? Like you need to get out of bed and go to school, just go to school. Yeah. Right. But a kid can't. So there's the recognition, and then there's the, oh my God, something's wrong. And then there's like the finding out what that thing is and getting the diagnosis. And then it's doing everything you need to do to find the resources. So it's kind of both. It's the awareness of finding the resources, and then it's the lack of availability of resources, particularly people who can't afford to pay.
Right.
So there's a lot that has to change for us to get to a point where, like, you look at, cancer is sort of a way that, sort of a way that we kind of think about it. Like, again, when I was growing up, it was the big C, right? People didn't talk about it. It was terrifying. Then the treatments improved. People talked about it. And then there was this cycle of like, people talking about it. There was political pressure, there was investment, and there's not stigma anymore. And so if people will bring you casseroles when, if you have cancer, people will help. Where is the help, and where is that stepping up when a kid is really struggling and a family is in crisis? Yeah. Right. So I think I'm an optimist. I feel like the gears are starting to turn a little bit. And so and the pandemic has sort of brought that to the fold, because it's so ubiquitous now that it's kind of like, now there is this opportunity, and it's not going to change overnight, but 20 or 30 years from now, it needs to be different. It has to be different.
That's so true. And what I love about Youth Mental Health Project is that, sometimes when you're a parent and you have a child where you're not sure where to go, and you take away the blame and you just provide an action, right? So it's like parents can sometimes say, okay, well, it's the school, or it's this, or it's that, but you're like, you nail it out and you say, hey, no, this is action. This is how you can move forward. But what I wanted to ask you was, in your opinion, how helpful are schools? Are could schools be more advanced? Are some schools more advanced than others in the way that they're helping? I would love your opinion.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, I think that there are, and we do a fair bit of speaking to schools and PTAs, and we partner with other organizations as well to go into schools and and talk. And I think the school issue is really interesting. I mean, that's where kids spend the bulk of their day.
Right.
So partnering with schools as a parent is really important for your kid. And I think, but I think that teachers are dealing with a lot of students on the one hand. So how much individualized attention can they provide in the classroom setting when they've got 35, like where I live, it's like 30, 35 kids in the public schools in a class. So teachers often will recognize that something's different because they see your child alongside everybody else's kid.
Right.
And so they know that something's different or that a kid is struggling. I think what we've experienced is we wanted the teacher to tell us what was going on in the classroom. And more often than not, they were really reluctant to do it. And because they've done it, and then parents have not reacted well, in a lot of cases. And so I think the classroom teachers are under a lot of stress. I mean, the pandemic has made it their job infinitely more difficult as well. But even baseline, they have a lot that they deal with in the course of a day, right? And there aren't necessarily the supports because there's not necessarily the budget for, I think there's, right. I forget what the statistic is. I just read a Washington Post article over the weekend, and I think it's like maybe 6 counselors for every like 10,000 kids or something. I mean, it's whatever it was, and I don't know exactly off the top of my head what the stat was, but it is inadequate for and the school counselors then are overwhelmed too, so it is, there is kind of a resource issue that we have. But I think by and large, schools have become, over the past 10, 15 years, become a lot more savvy about their they're sort of flagging it and having programming. And then there's also a lot of organizations that are very small, local organizations that are started by high school kids, right? Or middle school kids, where they start an organization with their school and they begin to talk about it. So there's also like that empower kids who are at an age where they want to be able to talk about it and they want to change the culture of their school, which I think is just remarkable. I think it's amazing because they then begin to push the administration to do more, right? They put it on they bump it up as a priority for the school leaders. So the schools are, I mean, it's just they're critically important. And we ask a lot of educators, but this is something that I think has definitely improved over the past 20 years.
Wow. And do you guys, I know you said that you've seen an improvement, but are there moments where you feel as if a school perhaps isn't ready to accept that mental health exists? Or is it kind of now everyone does understand that mental health exists, but maybe perhaps they're not there yet at taking the next step?
I think that we're on the path here of getting to a point where, I don't have enough information to say, 100% of our schools are really aware of and focused on it. Like it's in the consciousness, it's at that first stage.
Okay.
But I think we're getting there. We're getting there. And I think it probably depends on the school too. I mean, I think, in more affluent areas, is it different than in less advantaged areas, right? Like, are we able to have those conversations in a culturally sensitive way? Like, are schools able to provide resources in other languages that give people the vocabulary, not only in English, but in their native languages, to also help that? Like, and that idea of mental health disparity is one that exists. I mean, I come from the healthcare industry for many decades, so that disparity also very much exists in mental health. And so I imagine that I'd probably bet that there's a lot of unevenness in terms of the populations that, if we want to be serving everyone, and really helping our whole society, we have to make sure that we help everybody, regardless of how they are able to access mental health services and talk about it.
Wow. I totally even forgot how, once we can acknowledge what it is, then we need to put it in writing and with other languages. Totally slipped my mind. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we need to do that with our materials. They're in English, and it's on my short list to get them translated into Spanish and then, additional languages. So, I mean, we there are people who are native Chinese speakers, right? Like we have to make resources available in ways that meet people where they are.
Right. And it seems almost as if it's quite isolating. You know what I mean? It's just a isolating feeling. How do you explain that? And also you've dealt with this yourself. Could you sort of tell us maybe how you felt or?
Yeah, I mean, it was very, again, because our son was so young, and we had no idea. I mean, I should say we were lucky in the sense that my father-in-law is a psychologist who had practiced for 40 years. He retired recently. And he specialized in treating young people, right? Kids, young adults. And so he was pretty savvy. And my mother-in-law was pretty savvy. So when we were sort of recognizing things, they helped, and they're wonderful in-laws. They never kind of said, hey, here's, but if we had questions, and they never expressed opinions. When we had questions, we were able to ask them and get some guidance. So for us, it was just, we sort of saw that things were different pretty early on. It took a while to get the diagnoses. And then we, went through the whole medication, which we can, have a whole conversation about that, having to experiment with different medications until something works, which is truly awful. But there weren't other people we could talk to about it outside of our in-laws for some years. And so it was very difficult because, family members that we had told didn't necessarily understand. And so our son had gone through 4 schools by the time he was in 4th grade, until we found a school that we're very lucky. These schools don't exist across the country. And it was a school that called the Auburn School here in DC. And it teaches kids, academics, but also social emotional, gives them social emotional tools for kids who are either, on the spectrum or have ADHD, anxiety, sensory integration issues, what have you. And that school was a lifesaver for us. It really was, because we were teaching him these tools and the school was reinforcing it. So he got consistency over that 24 hours, right, of his life. And I think, that was a game changer for us. And the other thing from a parent perspective is when we went to the school, that kind of isolation that we experienced in mainstream schools melted away. And it was like I was with parents who understood, whose kids had the same experiences, whose kids, if the kid had a tantrum, we'd all just be like, oh, okay, yeah, my kid, okay, well, I'll talk to you later, Joanne, it's fine. You know what I mean? Nobody judged. And right. At previous schools, it was difficult as a parent because other parents were standoffish to me, right? Because they didn't, and understandably, they didn't want their kids feeling like they had to be friends with our son, right? And they didn't want to put their kids in that position, which, I understand, but it was very difficult. So for us, it was like, when I went to that school and there were parents who were like, oh yeah. Oh, have you tried this? Have you, it really was a game changer for us. And I think that's what we try to create within our support groups, is that feeling of, this is a no judgment zone. We've all been through something similar. Maybe my kids are a little bit older, maybe your kids are a little bit younger, but we can this is a place where you won't be judged, and you will find people who will support you, and where you can exchange information and resources, right? And that's what we try to create, because there's just not enough of that that happens for parents.
Wow. That's why I love exactly what you do, because for you, it comes from a place of something that you know. So when you're now the executive director, I mean, it's so awesome that you are there and someone on the forefront who knows exactly what has happened, and what it feels like and what's going on. So Youth Mental Health Project, this is amazing that they have someone like you as the forerunner. It's beautiful.
Thank you. And that's what motivates me and the other people who work. It's to make sure that other parents don't go through what we went through, right? Like that's sort of the overriding, and so when we think as an organization, what would have made a difference for me, right? What do I need? Those are the sort of services and things that the modalities that we put in place to try to help parents and caregivers. And we really want to start doing more, putting together more resources for coaches, dance teachers, right? Other people who may be trusted adults for kids, and who they might talk to, and who also should be educated, because if a kid's on your team and they're acting kind of different or strange or disruptive, it can be like, oh, maybe the kid isn't just being bad, right? Maybe there's something I need to do to take that kid aside and say, what's going on? And, give them the tools to be able to have those conversations. So the kid can stay on the dance team, or do normal activities that they want to do, so they're not limited.
Wow, that is so powerful, especially since you're doing it in such a neutral way, where like a coach, if something's going on, then they can, how do I internalize this? Is this something that I should bring up to the parents? Can I just go ahead and make a slight little change myself? Can I just add him in this group and it'll make the difference? And I figured it out myself.
Yeah, because kids need to be in the right. I mean, I think of kids like plants almost, right? Where, if you put a plant in the wrong environment, it's not going to thrive. If you put them in the right environment, that child can thrive. And so what's the environment that you can create around a child that allows them, what's the scaffolding that you can create so that every child thrives?
Right. Wow. And also, how can we sort of change how we talk and address mental health issues? As you mentioned before, it's not something that's easily able to be spoken about. How can we change this?
So I have a couple of examples. So one of the things, I was talking with a friend yesterday, actually, whose son just started kindergarten. And she was telling me she had him in a preschool where she looked specifically for a preschool that taught the social emotional piece, right? And gave her son, as a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, a vocabulary to actually talk about his feelings. So he'll say, "Mommy, I feel anxious," or "Mommy, I feel sad," or "Mommy, I'm happy." You know what I mean? But it goes beyond just sort of the basic, "I'm happy, I'm sad," right? And so I thought that was really remarkable. And I think that the integration of the social emotional tools into school curricula, into parents and families that are having these conversations, is really critical. And it's not easy to do. So we actually partner with an organization called Kimochis, and they're these little feelings pillows, and they're super cute. They're so for little kids, it's something that parents can get, and it's tactile, right? And so kids can be like, "I feel this way," or "What makes you feel that way?" There's a whole lot of stuff that you can do with those to help the younger kids with the vocabulary. So that's just sort of one example.
And a great example, because for someone like myself at age 26, I couldn't verbally talk about my feelings. I mean, I didn't know that maybe a pain in my side was a feeling of anger, and I didn't know how to express anger in its fullest sense and be able to sort of narrow it down and pinpoint where it comes from, how does it feel in your body, and just the whole area of it all. And so it's great that you're teaching people to start with their kids young so that as they grow up in their adulthood, they don't have a lot of these issues.
They have, yeah, they have the tools to express. And you bring up a really interesting point too, a really important one, which is the physical manifestation of that anxiety or sadness or what have you. And, a lot of people, like, they'll be like, when our son was younger, and a lot of people be like, my tummy hurts. My tummy hurts. Okay, well, do you need to go to school? Do you need to, as a parent, you go into, okay, did you throw up? Are you, you go through all the things and you're like, okay, you don't have a fever. There's nothing wrong with you. Well, it turns out it's like anxiety, it's that the anxiety was manifesting in their tummy or, your back as an adult, right? When I feel anxious, my back always goes out, right? So that connection and being able to say about the mental, emotional part on the physical body, that's something that we didn't really talk about, up until very, very recently. And it was this fringy, new age, like mind body connection.
Right.
But, when you think about it though, like I've been thinking about this lately, when you think about it though, it's like coaches always say, get your head in the game, right? But sports is about the physical, except, it really wasn't. So even when I was growing up, people didn't talk about the mind body connection, but coaches would say, get your head in the game.
So true.
Right. And we see, with Simone Biles, she was physically able to do these incredible things at the Olympics, but there were other things that she was dealing with. And she was just like, I'm gonna do for me right now. Right.
And the backlash.
And that, right. And the backlash was, it was like, what? I didn't understand. I thought it was really, really brave of her to do that, to say, you know what, the weight of the world's expectations on me is mentally damaging to me. And I could physically really hurt myself with the kind of stuff that I'm doing. And I'm going to take care of me because that's what I need to do. So the backlash didn't make sense to me. But I did see a lot of support for her.
Right. Right.
There was also a fair bit of support. And she had said, I guess, other athletes were coming up to her in the Olympic Village and saying, this is really, what you did was really great. And so, that part of it, I hang on to the positive part of it, right? Which is that there were a lot of people who supported her in that. But that mind-body connection and the physical manifestation of it that you can't understand, right? It's I get this knot in my shoulder every time I'm stressed. Why is that? Right? It matters. It matters.
And another thing that matters is that mental health issues present themselves before age 24. And this is something that is so key and important. Can you explain to everyone why?
Yeah. And so half of mental health issues manifest before age 18. And like you said, 75% before age 24. So what this means is that, I see it as an opportunity. So there's an opportunity to intervene early. So first of all, there's an obligation, right? To intervene early, to recognize it, to know the signs. And then there's an opportunity to teach those skills early. And because there are strategies, and the way we think about mental health at the Youth Mental Health Project is that everybody has mental health, right? And mental health is the state of well-being, right? Social, emotional, and psychological. And so to get to sort of begin to understand that continuum and begin to understand that there's situational sort of anxiety or depression that happens if you have trauma in your life, if you lose a parent, if you go through a divorce, these things can be sort of situational. But in a lot of cases, these are chronic conditions, right? And the idea is, just like your kid has diabetes, as soon as something's weird, they're constantly sick, they're losing weight, you go to the doctor, they get a diagnosis, and then for the rest of that person's life, they manage their diabetes. Right. And there are times when their blood sugar is stabilized, there are times when it isn't. And we think about mental health the same way, right? And so intervening early is more of an opportunity to put the tools and supports in place that then the kid can internalize when they get into young adulthood, right? So they begin to develop that resilience. They begin to say, okay, I'm recognizing that I'm feeling this way. And that means like, I'm going to spiral if I don't take care of myself. I need to take a step back, or I know I'm going to go into a trough. And so that, to me, that's why the early intervention is so important, because for that reason, and also because you can get the school working with you, right? And the school can be a partner, and people are really reluctant to be transparent about it, but it doesn't do the child any favors if the teacher doesn't know what they should be looking at in the course of the day. And I have yet to hear of a teacher who, when you bring something to their attention, they don't say, oh, okay, I will do my best to, to keep my eye on it, right? Or to help, or, oh, maybe we could do this or do that in the classroom, kind of thing, right? So that early intervention essentially sets a kid up for success as an adult, and where they say, yeah, I have this chronic condition and I just need to manage it. And then they do, right? Up and down.
And what needs to be done to get families the resources they need? How do you guys help, and how can other people help?
Yeah, so we have, for our parent support groups, especially when they're in person, online is a little more difficult because we draw from lots of different states. But for the in-person meetings, there is exchange of resources within that group. We also, I have it on my strategic agenda to create a resource repository on our website. And so people can sort of go in, and over time we'll build it and refine it and be able to kind of find some of those resources. So I think that, those are ways that we kind of address that. I think one of the things that we tell parents who reach out to us too is, if we're not in their local community, to say, have you talked to the resource specialist at school? Make sure that you're finding whatever resources you can. Call your local health department, right? They can maybe point you to some county resources that you could access. If you have insurance, call your insurance company, see what they will pay for, see what they cover, see what your options are. Maybe they can help you find a provider who takes your insurance. And again, we're bumping up against the waiting lists, but those are the kinds of things that exist. And it's not, like we talked about before, it's not as robust as what it needs to be. And it will take a lot of persistence to deal with. But that's the option set that's out there right now. So there's a lot of room to grow as a society and as a culture in what we value. And we are starting to value mental health.
And the great thing about Youth Mental Health Project is that you guys continuously bring hope, right? So if a parent comes to you and they're like, I don't know what to do or where to go, you automatically know, okay, try this. Oh, I tried this, it didn't work. Okay, well, try this. You're keeping that momentum of keep trying until that they can find what they need. And so it keeps that hope of, okay, maybe this didn't work, but I can try this now. I'm going to keep going. And the parent has to truly feel that in order to keep going to help the child, because as you said, sometimes it's really difficult for children to be able to help themselves.
And we also partner with other organizations that, so for us, self-care is really important for the caregivers, because you lose sleep, you might not eat very well, you're worried all the time. And so, we have people that we have webinars with who talk about yoga. We have a guy, Jesse Cody, who's amazing, is hiking 1,300 miles of the Pacific Coast Trail for us for 70 days as a fundraiser for us. And so we've been talking a lot about being outdoors and hiking, and that is an option. Like, what is it, you have to put your oxygen mask on before assisting others. If you're hanging on by a thread,
Mhm.
you're going to have a much harder time being as helpful as you want to be, right? So you have to make sure that you're getting what you need. If it's reading a book, if it's taking a walk, if it's getting away for a weekend, if it's going to visit a friend, if it's regular exercise, if it's being outside, like whatever it is that makes you, that restores you,
Mhm.
it's really important to carve out time to do that, because I've done it both ways. I've done it in ways early on where I wasn't taking my care of myself particularly well. And then when I sort of pivoted, it just felt less overwhelming to me.
Mm.
And at the Youth Mental Health Project, we want to provide options for people to think about, like, okay, maybe meditation isn't for me, but maybe I'll try yoga. Like maybe that's not for me. Maybe I really need to do CrossFit, right? Like I need to just get it out, however people, or I just need to be out with friends and I just need to turn this off for a little bit, right? And it's okay. And telling parents, it is okay to do that, right? Give yourself permission to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
You guys are doing amazing things. And how can we as the community support? Should we, I mean, I think one of the greatest things is just word of mouth.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's a few ways that people can get involved. I mean, they can certainly go to our website. They can see our materials. We have old webinars. They can attend upcoming webinars, or they can watch old webinars. We also have this wonderful product called the Mental Health Monologues, and we partnered with some creative geniuses to put together. It's about an hour long. It's about 45 minutes to an hour long, and it's recorded. And it was young people of all ages, all demographics, who wrote monologues, essays about their experience.
Wow.
And they hired young actors to perform those monologues, and it's recorded. So that's something where little kids, you can use komochis and other things, adolescents and high schoolers, they're more likely to talk to their friends than they are to talk to their parents about a lot of things. And so if you're a parent and you want to engage your kid, one way to do it is to watch the mental health monologues with them, and that's a discussion tool with them, right? Because it's someone articulating perhaps how they're feeling. So we want to kind of follow it up with a mental health dialogues and some other things, but we do have these resources. And certainly right now, I don't know when this is going to air, but right now Jesse Cody is hiking. We have a fundraiser going, and people can certainly, we're more than happy for people to donate, of course, to our cause. And I would say if you are a parent who has lived experience raising a child who has struggled with his or her mental health, we love to train up facilitators, and we can have, they can volunteer as facilitators, and they can also help other parents. And so I think for people who are in the thick of it, it's hard to sort of imagine having the headspace to be able to run a support meeting for other people. But I've also heard from our facilitators that actually I need to stop thinking about my own situation for an hour and a half every 2 weeks and think about somebody else's situation and get out of my own head. And then we also have parents whose kids are through the worst of it, right? And they're in sort of a good place and they want to help other people. So we always love having volunteer facilitators come get trained. And then we work with them to help set up a support group in their area, or maybe they're more comfortable online. We have online sessions they can help with. So lots of work to do, lots of ways to help.
So beautiful. This is amazing. Youth Mental Health Project is changing the world, you guys. Valerie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Key. You're changing the world, and I am so excited to support you and Youth Mental Health Project in this journey. And any way, guys, that you can help, I will be listing everything in the comment section below. But we have to talk about it, guys. It's an issue, but you know what? Just as Valerie said, we're going to stay positive about it. And we're going to find out all the ways that we can, rather than all the ways that we don't know.
Thank you so much, Ashlee. It's always great to talk to you.
Thanks, Valerie.
All right.